Hello, welcome. Thank you for joining us today. We're getting started in 1 second here. Just going to give everyone a chance to filter in. Thanks so much for joining us. All right. Okay, and it looks like we've got folks in. So I'm going to get us moving here. And actually, let's just take one more second. Sorry, give me 1 second, folks. All right, there we go. Okay, so welcome. Thank you all so much for joining us today for the second day of our Learning Libby with the Experts series. Today we are talking about tips and tricks. If you joined us earlier in the week for our Getting Started session, welcome back. If you are already familiar with Libby and you weren't there for the Getting Started session, welcome for the very first time. We are so excited to talk through some of our favorite features in the library reading app, Libby. Before we dive in, of course, we want to introduce ourselves. My name is Joe, and I'm here from Overdrive. You may have heard of Overdrive. You might have even used our original app in the past. And we are the makers of Libby. So we took the years of feedback we received from the original Overdrive app, and we used that to build Libby from the ground up. So Libby is really designed with you in mind as a reader. So everything you see has kind of come from that thoughtful place. At Overdrive, I'm a part of the digital bookmobile team, and we have a big old truck that we send across the US and Canada, visiting different folks just like yourselves to help everyone get started. So, just like we're doing here virtually, a lot of times we do in person, but we're still staying safe at home. I'm here with the other half of the team.
Hello, good morning. My name is Marissa. As Joe mentioned, I'm the other half of the digital bookmobile team. We are a two-person team, obviously. Joe is kind of the coordinator of our team. He does things like manages our budget, plans our tour route, plans these events that we do virtually. And then I am the traveler with our digital bookmobile slash the lead trainer for these sessions. So in my 3 years at Overdrive, I've helped thousands of people learn how to use Libby. I did the basics earlier this week and also some of the tips and tricks that we're going to share with you today. So we're so excited to be here.
We are. We are so excited to be here. We love the chance to talk with y'all and really get you excited about reading with your virtual library. Now, before we dive into our tips and tricks, just some quick housekeeping. We do have closed captions enabled for this webinar. You should be seeing them already on your screen. They appear like subtitles. That's the word I was looking for. If you need to adjust those at all, just look for the box that says CC in your Zoom meeting controls and just tap on the arrow next to it and you'll be able to make any adjustments you need, whether that's to change the way that they function or turn them on or off. You can also ask us questions throughout this entire webinar. While Marissa's presenting, I'll be responding with text in the Q&A box. So tap on Q&A, type out your question, and then my answer will appear there. You can ask questions anonymously if that makes you more comfortable. And of course, we do have some time that we'll set aside at the end where we will go over any of the questions that were asked that we want to share with the whole group. Just so everyone can kind of benefit from the exchange. Now, we are recording our session this morning, and you will get a link to that recording. You're going to get an email tomorrow morning from Zoom that will give you access to the full recording of this presentation. So if you'd like to see something again, if a distraction pops up and you have to step away, or if you have to leave the webinar, you'll be able to review anything you missed. Or if you want to share it with family and friends, another great option there as well. Also in that email, you'll receive a link to the recording of our Getting Started session from earlier this week and for our Getting Started PDF, which just includes some high-level videos, just short video clips of everything we cover. So if you're joining us today, you're already a Libby user, but maybe you just want to see some high points, the PDF may also be your friend. Now, a survey is going to pop up in your browser when the webinar ends. Fill that out for us to let us know how we can improve. We'd greatly appreciate it. And then lastly, Marissa's going to be connecting her iPad into the session this morning. Sometimes when we do that, Zoom will shrink the display. It's very important that you can see all of her screen so you can see everything she's doing in the Libby app. I'll be sending out some instructions in the chat once she gets her device connected. So if you need to make that adjustment, it's just a few simple clicks. All right. So the 4 tips and tricks Marissa's going to break down for y'all today are as follows. We're going to show you how you can filter out unwanted books with preferences. We'll show you how to refine lists so you can find the titles you like faster. Then we're going to go probably into our favorite tip of them all. This is about tags, how you can create and export tagged lists. And then we'll break down defining words and making notes and highlights within your books. Great for those of you in book club, students in school, or if you're like Marissa and I and you just like to make notes while you're reading. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Marissa, let her get connected here into the presentation. Remember, if you have any questions, I'll be hanging out in the Q&A area, and I'll be happy to help you out. Otherwise, Marissa, it's all yours.
All right, thank you, Joe. Let me just rearrange my screen here. Okay, so before I jump right in, I just want to give that final reminder about the Zoom ratio. So down at the bottom of my screen, I have the navigation bar of the Libby app. It has 5 icons within it: search, library, menu, shelf, and timeline. If you cannot see that navigation bar, then Joe is putting instructions in the chat for you to follow. It's a couple of clicks, super, super quick, and it will allow you to follow along with me much easier as I go through our tips and tricks. So our first 2 tips and tricks are kind of sisters, if you will. It's all about finding the books that you like faster. First, we'll talk about preferences, and then we'll talk about refining. So what I'm going to do for our first and second tip is I'm going to pop into one of our filters up here at the top. I'm going to pop into available now. You can see when we go into this list, we're going to be presented with 93,000 books. That is a large list, and although one of my favorite pastimes is looking through a list of books and adding them to my TBR, I could do it for hours and hours. We're going to pretend, we're in a rush and we really want to narrow this list down. So the first tip we have is filtering out unwanted books with preferences. So you'll see when you're in a list, on the left-hand side of the screen, there is a preferences button. Preferences are filters that are saved and applied to all lists in Libby. And what that means is you can set a preference, and then it doesn't matter how many times you open and close the Libby app or how long in between opening the Libby app you go, whether it's a week or a couple of months, Libby is going to remember these filters for you and continue to filter out unwanted content. So within the preferences menu, there are quite a few filters that you can place. I'm going to talk about these first 3 up at the top. They are by far the most common filters for preferences that people set. And so let's go ahead and talk about those. The first filter you see here is format. So right now, when I'm looking for a book in Libby, I can see books that are ebooks, audiobooks, and magazines. Now, I've met quite a few people who are very particular about how they consume their reading. They either want to read it in print or listen to it in the audio format. I've also met people who are just interested in magazines. So if any of those apply to you, then you can select the format that you prefer most. and that will filter out those other formats for you. So then anytime you're searching for a book, you'll only come across books that are in the format that you prefer. So really, really great feature there. The next one I'll talk about is language. I would say of all of our preferences, this is the most common one to set because generally we speak 1 to 2 languages. And so if you are someone who is limited in the amount of languages you speak, you could go ahead and set a preference here so that Libby only shows books that are written or spoken in the language that you know. I am going to set a English preference. Much to my high school French teacher's dismay, I retained very little of what I learned there, and so I only speak English, and therefore when I search for books, I only want to see books that are written in English. The last one here I'll talk about is audience. Right now, when I'm looking for a book, I see books that are written from juvenile all the way up to mature content. I like to point this one out for you in case you have any, kiddos in your life and they have their own device and you want to make sure they're seeing age-appropriate content. In this preference, you could set 2. You could set juvenile and a YA, or if it's a younger kid, just juvenile. If it's a slightly, teen or tween, you could do just young adult. But this will make it so that all of that general and mature content is going to be filtered out. So they're not going to come across 50 shades of gray. They'll only see that age-appropriate content. Now, I am going to stick with my English preference here, and then I'm going to come down to the bottom of the screen and tap Apply Preferences. If I were on a smaller device, like a phone, for example, I might have to scroll down just a bit to see that Apply Preferences button. So just make sure that you are coming down to the bottom of the menu and tapping Apply Preference. Otherwise, it's not going to save. And you'll know that that preference has saved because a number will appear next to that preference button. And the number is just indicating how many preferences you have set. So I set my 1 English preference. That's why a 1 is showing up next to it. And now I know Libby is filtering out my searching and my browsing moving forward. So that is tip number 1, how to filter out unwanted content with a preference. I'm now going to move into tip number 2. And tip number 2 is going to be all about temporarily refining your lists and your searching and browsing to find the books that you like faster. So for this tip, I'm going to give a little prompt here. We can see I have 45,000 books, 22,000 audiobooks, and 3,000 magazines in this list. Let's pretend my mom and I are going to go on a road trip tomorrow. So I need to find an audiobook for us to listen to. That's going to be the first criteria that I'm going to use to filter this list, an audiobook format. My mom loves mystery historical fiction titles, so I'm going to look for those subjects. And then she's also a really avid reader, and so the best bet is for me to find a book for us to listen to is going to be a new release. Otherwise, she might have already read it already. So those 3 criteria are what I'm going to use to narrow this list down: audiobook format, mystery historical fiction, and a new release. So in this same list here, right across from preferences, you'll see the button for refining. Now I'm going to tap on it and you're going to think, these are the same categories, Marissa, that we saw with preferences. And while that is very true, I want to point out that the difference is that refining is temporary. And so I mentioned preferences stick and stay. It doesn't matter how many times you open and close the Libby app or how long in between reading sessions you go. Refining is temporary, and that means For this specific browsing searching situation, these filters will apply. And then the next time I look for a book, they're going to revert back to their default. So let's get started temporarily refining this list. First, I'm going to come up to Format, and we will select our audiobook. So our list is already starting to get smaller, but I have 2 more criteria to meet. So I'm going to come back to Refine, and I'll select my subjects. Now, I said my mom likes mystery. That drops us down to 2,900, but she likes mystery historical fiction. She likes that combo of the 2. So I'm going to come back to subject, and I'm going to select historical fiction. And you'll notice that number has dropped to 229. And I want to point out that this list includes historical fiction and mystery. So it's that combination of both of those subjects or genres. And I like to point this out for you so that you know you can find niche subjects. You're not limited to something broad like mystery. You can add additional subjects to narrow that down. The sweet spot is 2 to 3 subject filters. Once you get past that, Libby's going to be like, there's not a lot of results for books that fall under 4 different subjects at once. So 2 to 3 is generally that sweet spot. But you can find those niche subjects. Now, 229 is a decent sized list. I like that list. I'm going to stick with that number, but I do want to find a new release. So I'm going to come back to Refine, and I'm going to sort this list. So down in that Refine menu, I'll find Sort By, and I'll choose Release Date. And now that I've selected the release date sort by, the newest titles are going to show up at the top. And then as I make my way down this list, they're going to get older and older. So we started out with almost 90,000 of the available now books, and we've narrowed this down to 229, making it easier to find the books that we like faster. The very last part of this tip that I want to show you is for those of you who might go back to the same filter or the same subject list over and over again. This is something I do a lot. I'm a big nonfiction reader, so I am always in the nonfiction subject filter. And so a lot of the times I've seen the first page of that list 1,000 times, and I want to jump farther into the list so I'm not seeing the same books. So what I'm going to do is just scroll down until we find the page break. So when it goes from page 1 to page 2, that's what I'm looking for. There we go. Here's that page break. You can see page 2 of 10 is showing up here. I'm going to tap on that page break, and Libby is going to give me a list of the pages here. So let's say I've seen the first 3 pages of this list a bunch. I want to jump over to page 4. I'm going to tap on page 4. And now Libby is allowing me to skip over those pages that I've seen maybe one too many times. So that's how you can jump to a specific page in a list. And that wraps up tip number 2, how to refine your searching and browsing so that you can find the books that you like faster. We're now going to move into tip number 3. And as Joe mentioned, this is probably our favorite tip of them all. We are both list makers at heart. We love to stay organized, and tags are how you can create lists in Libby. Now, If you were previously an Overdrive user, you'll probably remember that there was a wish list and a history list. And those are the two lists that you were limited to in the Overdrive app. In Libby, we heard a lot of, I want to create my own lists. I want to make as many lists as I like. And so that's when we launched the tag feature. Tags are a way that you can create lists. You can name those lists whatever you'd like, and you can create as many as you'd like. So some examples of lists that Joe and I have used or have seen are books under a certain amount of time or a certain amount of pages. Joe creates lists for his niece, so he'll send lists to his sister, say, read these to Reagan, or make his own list to read to Reagan. I make lists to keep track of gift giving. So I have a few avid readers in my life, but especially my father-in-law reads a lot and he loves history books. And so instead of Christmas rolling around and me spending a lot of time at the bookstore trying to find a history book for him, what I'll do is throughout the year, as I'm looking through Libby, finding my own books, I come across a history book that sounds like it's up his alley. I'll just add it to my tag list for him. And then when Christmas rolls around, I'm at the bookstore, I open up my list, I see the book, find that book really quickly, and then I can spend more time at the bookstore for myself. So those are some creative ways that you can use your tags. You can also be basic with them. You could create wish lists. You could create history lists as well. Let's go ahead and show you how to create a tag. I'll then show you where those tag lists live in Libby. And then I'll also show you how to export those tag lists out of the app. If you wanted to print that list out or email it to a friend, you have those options as well. So let's say I'm going through this list here, looking for that book for my mom and I's road trip, and I come across A Dangerous Place. Now, this looks pretty good, but mom's already read it. So I want to save it for myself for later. What I'm going to do is come down to tag. It's the third option that I see next to the jacket cover there. And in tags, you can create a new tag, or you can tap on any of your existing tags if you wanted to add it to one of those. Now, I want to make clear the differences between regular tags and smart tags. Regular tags are tags that you create yourself to stay organized. So you come up with the names of these and you manually add the books to these tags. I have a couple examples of some regular tags I create. A to be read, my wish list, a cooking tag to keep track of some recipes that I enjoy, and then a beach reads tag. This is kind of like my mood tag. When I'm in that mood for a beach read, I'll pop in there and pick one out from that list. Smart tags, on the other hand, are Libby's tags. Libby creates these tags, and Libby will keep these tags organized for you at the most part. They have some special abilities here. The first smart tag that you see is that little red receipt. That is the borrowed smart tag. And the borrowed smart tag is Libby's tag to automatically keep track of books that you've borrowed in the Libby app. So as soon as you borrow a book, this tag will show up next to it, and that will allow you to keep track of your borrowed books. I'm going to show you why this is a game changer here in a second after I talk about our other tags as well. The second tag that you see here is the Notify Me magazine tag. The Notify Me tag is currently specific to magazines. And what it does is the very first time you borrow a magazine, Libby will prompt you to create your Notify Me tag. Once you create that tag, you can add all of your favorite magazines to the Notify Me tag, and all of the issues that are new to the library thereafter you will get an alert for. You'll get a notification for it. So it's Libby's way of saving you a little bit of time, alerting you when your new issues come in instead of you having to go back into the collection and keep trying to find those magazines over and over. The third and final smart tag is this little piece of cake. This is the sampled smart tag. The sampled smart tag is going to automatically apply to any books that you read or listen to the sample of. So my mom is someone who reads at the literally at the library. She will read the first 5 pages of a book to determine if she's going to borrow it or not. So this is the digital version of that. If you're someone who likes to listen to the sample or play the sample before you commit, Libby's going to give you a little cake indicator moving forward. I'll show you, just like with that borrowed smart tag, how this comes in handy moving forward. But for now, I just want to reiterate, smart tags have special abilities. We have the borrowed, notify me, and sampled smart tags. Regular tags are tags you create to stay organized. Let's go ahead and create a new tag here to show you as an example. So I'll tap on new tag. And I'm a big genre tagger because I'm a mood reader. I try to stick to a TBR list, but I really am a mood reader. When I'm in the mood for a mystery, I'll pop into my mystery tag. So I'm going to name that mystery. We do have a few ideas down here if you'd like to use any of those, and then we can add a description. If it's something that's a little more complicated, you can add a description as well. I know what this means, so I'm going to go ahead and tap on done. And we see that mystery tag has applied next to a dangerous place. Now we're still searching or browsing for a book, right? And so I'm in this list, and let's say I come across Dreaming Spies. I see that I borrowed that book before. I had that borrowed smart tag here indicating that I've read it before. And so I can just skip over this book when I'm searching and browsing because Libby's letting me know I've read it. If you are anything like me, then sometimes the title, the description, and the jacket cover aren't enough to spark the memory of reading it before. So it is nice to have that smart tag letting us know we borrowed it. Let's say I continue down this list here and I come across Plague Island or Plague Land, sorry. I see that that has that sampled smart tag, so that little piece of cake. That means I've listened to that sample. And there's not a borrowed tag next to that sample tag. And that means I listened to the sample. I probably didn't like that narrator or the writing style, perhaps. And so I never borrowed it. And so that is a good indicator as well. I can skip over this book while I'm searching and browsing because I played that sample and I didn't like it for some reason. Now, as I continue scrolling, I come across A Fine Summer's Day, and that has my to be read smart tag, or not smart tag, this is a regular tag next to it. That means I've added it to my wish list. I'm probably going to go ahead and borrow this book because I've shown interest in it before. So another way of saving me a little bit of time. So that is how you can create smart tags and then what they look like when you're searching and you're browsing. I'm going to go ahead now and show you where all of these lists live in Libby, how we can look at all of the books that we've added to those lists. I'm going to come down to my shelf. That's that stack of books that says shelf underneath. And then up in the top of the shelf, we'll see tags. I have 7 tag lists created. And if I tap on tags here, then I can see what tags I have. So let's go ahead. I'm going to jump into my beach reads tag. I want to see that list. I'll tap on beach reads. And here are the 4 books that I've marked as beach reads. Now, one really nice thing that you can do in the Libby app is with this icon over on the right-hand side, we have a library card with a plus sign next to it. There's also the calendar with the clock next to it. These icons first indicate if the book is available to borrow, that's the plus sign, or if it's on a waiting list, that's the calendar. Another thing this icon does is allows you, if you tap on it, to place the hold or borrow the book right from that screen. And it compares the availability across all of your libraries for that specific book. So we can see here, there's a 2-week wait for the book at my digital library, and it's having trouble finding the book at all at my digital bookmobile library. That means they probably don't own it. And so if you have multiple library cards attached to Libby, this is a really great way to compare waiting lists or see if a book is available at any of your libraries. So I always like to show that off. I know it's a slight deviation from the tip, but it is a really nice feature. And these icons do appear everywhere in the Libby app. You'll see them when you're searching. You'll see them when you're browsing. You'll see them from your timeline and in your tags. So there's quite a few places that you can tap on that icon and compare your availability. Back to our tagging tip, I'm going to come up to actions here. And here we can rename our tag or delete the tag. I like to point this out for anyone who might want to delete the borrowed smart tag. If you don't want Libby automatically tagging your borrowed books, you're more than welcome to do that. And then you can also export your tag. Exporting means taking it out of the app to share it or print it. So there are a few different file types, just depending on how you'd like to share this. HTML is going to be a web page. CSV is going to be for offline use. So if you want to take it offline, this is the route you should go. I'm just going to do the table for example. And now I'm on the data export page. So this is going to depend on what web browser you're using, where you're going to find your share icon. I'm on an iOS device, an iPad mini, and so it's in Safari up in the top right-hand corner. Firefox, I believe it's down at the bottom. Google Chrome, it's probably going to move around as well. So depending on your web browser, you will have to look in different places, but it's going to be a square with an arrow pointing up. If you tap on that icon, you'll be able to send your tag list in a text message. You can send it in an email as well. And then if you scroll down just a little bit here, you'll also have the ability to print. So if you wanted a physical copy, you maybe wanted to pass out a list at book club for everyone to vote on, you can print that tag list out as well. So that is tip number 3, all about tags. I know it is a big tip there, a lot of information thrown at you, but tags are a really nice feature. Like we said earlier, one of our favorites if you like to make lists. I'm now going to move into tip number 4. This is going to be our final tip of the day before we get into our mini quiz and our Q&A sections. And that's all about making notes and highlights in an ebook. So from my shelf, I'm going to open up an ebook here in the Libby app. My copy of Pride and Prejudice here. And we're going to talk about 2 things, actually, notes and highlights and defining. So first, let's go ahead and talk about defining. When you're reading a book in Libby, if you come across a word that you don't know, what you can do is hold your finger on that word or your mouse. You're going to click, like keep clicking hold your click, there we go, if you're on libbyapp.com. So I'm going to hold my finger on the word provoke. We can see that it turns blue. And once that word turns blue, we can lift our finger up. So you're hearing me say, hold your finger, lift your finger up. The reason I'm trying to be clear about that is if you're tapping, you're probably going to turn the page. So keep your finger on the screen until the word turns blue, then you can lift it up, and that will give you the option to define. Now, defining words in Libby is great for a couple reasons. First, Libby will give us the dictionary definition. Libby does follow whatever language dictionary is downloaded to your phone. So if you have a Spanish dictionary downloaded to your phone, Libby will give you the Spanish definition in Spanish, just to be clear there. We see some synonyms, and then we see some topics. And these topics are pulled from Wikipedia. And so what's really nice about defining words in Libby is that you're not limited to defining traditional words. You can also define proper nouns. This comes in handy if you're a nonfiction reader. Like, for example, my father-in-law, when he's reading books about presidents and they've dropped some names of people he doesn't know, he can define, quote unquote, define those and get the Wikipedia blurb. And it's also nice if you're reading books that, talk about famous art pieces, music, things like that, places. And so you can define proper nouns. You also have the ability to translate any of the words that you define into a different language. So if you're reading a book that takes place in Paris, someone happens to drop a French word and you don't know what it is, the book doesn't tell you what that means, you can go in and translate that into whatever language you speak, and you'll be able to understand. So once you are done defining that word, you just tap above that menu and it will drop off the screen. Now let's say I wanted to highlight a passage in this book. I'm going to go ahead and highlight the second paragraph here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold my finger on Miss. And as soon as it turns blue, I'm going to drag my finger across the screen. I have not lifted my finger up yet. And once the full passage turns blue, after dragging my finger across the screen, that's when I'm going to lift my finger up. Now I have the option to highlight. We have a few different colors here if you'd like to stay organized. I'll go green. Placed my green highlight. And now let's say I want to add a note. I want to, talk a little bit about this passage at book club. What I'm going to do is tap on the highlight and my note menu has dropped down. So I've typed full paragraphs in this menu here. You're not limited to just a couple of words like I'm doing right now, but for the sake of demonstration, I'll say this is a note, and then I'm just going to tap in the middle of the screen, and that note drops away. And I'm going to page forward here. And let's say I now want to reference a note or a highlight that I made earlier in the book. What I'm going to do is tap on the very center of the screen to make my menus appear. And then up in the top right-hand corner, we see the three bookmarks. Those bookmarks are how you can find all of your notes and highlights in your ebook. So let's say I wanted to reference this note here in chapter 3 about Mr. Bingley. I'm going to tap on that passage. Libby takes me back to that page. I can see the highlight that I placed. And then if I want to review the note that accompanies that highlight, I just have to tap on the highlight itself and the note will drop down. Now, occasionally you will borrow a book, make your notes and highlights in that book, and then it will go back to the library on its due date. And unfortunately, if the book is not available to borrow again, you won't be able to find your notes and highlights the way that I just showed you. However, there are two other ways you can find your notes and highlights, even if that book is no longer on your shelf in Libby. So let me show you how to do that. I'm going to leave this ebook. And the thing that we need to do to find the notes and highlights of a book that we have borrowed previously at the library is to go to the details page. So the easiest way to get to the details page is to search for the book that we know we made notes and highlights in. And here's another reason I love that borrowed smart tag. I've borrowed this book before, so that's definitely the book that I'm looking for. I'm going to tap on the jacket cover to view the details page. So you're going to find your notes and highlights via the details page, all right? On the details page, you will have a reading journey. Your reading journey will show you every action that you've ever taken with that book. So you can see I've picked this book up 6 times. I've read it for 5 minutes because it's my demo library. And so we see all of those actions that I've taken with the book. Up in the top right-hand corner, we see that actions button. It looks familiar because we talked about exporting our tags. Here we can export our reading data. So that's going to be our notes and our highlights instead of our tag lists. Following the same steps that I showed you in tip number 3, you can export your notes and highlights out of the app for printing or emailing. Now, sometimes that's just a step too far and you just want to quickly reference a note that you made. On the reading journey, you can scroll down to the timeline for the title, and that's going to list out your highlights here. So let's say I want to reference this highlight at 3%. I'll tap on it, and the full passage I highlighted is showing up at the top. And then right underneath in quotations is the note that I made about that passage. So you can view your notes and highlights even after the title has returned to the library. And that wraps up tip number 4. So Joe, I'm going to hand things back over to you so you can get us started in our mini quiz.
Thanks, Marissa. Yeah, I love all of these tips. These are, I mean, I guess they are 4 of our favorite features, so that makes sense, but it's just so much fun to get to share them with everyone today. So we are about to roll into our mini quiz here. The questions are going to appear on your screen automatically. They are completely anonymous, so just give them your best answer or your best guess, and let's go through, and then we'll leave a little bit of time after this for live Q&A. All right, for question number 1, if you only wanted to temporarily filter a list or your search results, which type of filter would you use? Refine or preference? So which one is our temporary option? And I'll close this in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right. So if you want to temporarily filter a list or your search results, you are going to go to that bar and tap on refine. So from here, you can make any of these different choices. Like, let's say we just wanted to look at romance titles. We can tap on that, and we've got a temporary filter using refine. If you want a permanent filter, filtering things out all the time, tap into preferences. One of the most popular we see on the road is language. and you can hit apply preferences. Once that's done, you'll see the number of preferences you have set appear next to it. So remember, refining is temporary for the search or the list you're in just for that moment, and preferences are saved and applied across the Libby app for all time until you go in and change them. Great work, everyone. So for question number 2, let's keep rolling in a similar vein here. True or false, you can add multiple subject filters to find niche results in Libby. Just 2 answers here, true or false. And I'll close this in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And of course, the correct answer is true. You can add multiple subjects by going to refine and tapping subject and adding additional. So we started with romance. Let's also make it a fantasy. You can add niche subjects to your search results in Libby so you can find those books that really fit your needs. Like Marissa showed us, she was looking for a mystery historical fiction. And just remember, we recommend, doing no more than 4 after, even when you start to hit 4, you're going to find less and less results. So know that the more niche you get, the shorter your list is going to be. Question number 3, here we go. What are the 3 types of smart tags? So select all that apply. You have a borrowed smart tag, a sampled smart tag, a to be read smart tag, or a notify me smart tag. Which 3 of these 4 are smart tags? And I'll close this in 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. All right. So when you want to look at your list of tags, all of your tags are going to live on your shelf. So we know we can filter out and see just our loans or just our holds. We can also see our tags. When we tap on tags, all of our lists pop up here. You have a borrowed smart tag, which shows up as a receipt. You have the notify me smart tag, which lets you know when a new issue of a magazine is available. And you have that piece of cake or the sampled smart tag, letting you know what books you have read or listened to a sample of. Remember that to be read smart tag is one of the ones that Marissa created in her demo Libby. It's just a regular tag, no special abilities there. You can make as many regular tags as you like. The only limit is your imagination. And our last question here, where can you find your notes and highlights after a title is returned on its due date? Can you find it in your tags on your shelf, in the reading journey on the book's titles, on the book's details page? Too many words today for me. Or can you find it on the timeline? So where can you find your notes and highlights after a book is returned on its due date? In your tags on your shelf, in the reading journey on the details page, or on the timeline. And I'll close this in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right. Well, excellent work, everyone. Thank you for participating in the quiz. Let's look at our last answer here. So you can find your notes and highlights after a title is returned on its due date in the reading journey on the book's details page. Now, there's a variety of ways to get there, but the easiest, search for the title, tap on its jacket cover, and then tap on the reading journey box. From here, if you want to quick view your notes or highlights, just scroll down to the timeline for the title and tap excuse me, tap on the highlight you'd like to view. You'll see the full amount of text that you highlighted and the full note you wrote. If you'd like to export these, you can follow the same steps that you do with exporting tags on this reading journey page. Tap the actions button and you can export. But that wraps up our mini quiz. And I am now going to give y'all, let's say, it looks like we have about 10 minutes left in our time together today. So if you have any questions, please send those through the Q&A now, and Marissa and I will give you some live answers. Once again, thank you all so much for joining us today. Remember that you'll get an email tomorrow morning from Zoom that includes a link to the recording of this session, as well as a recording of our Getting Started session. So you'll see both of those links in there split out for you. And you'll also see a link to a Getting Started PDF. So if you just want to refresh anything we covered earlier, of course, you can just watch those short video clips. You're more than welcome to share either the links to these recordings or to that PDF with family and friends, anyone who you think would benefit from meeting Libby. So we'll give y'all a minute here if you have any questions. If we don't have any come through, of course, we'll just end our time together a little early. Marissa, is there anything you wanted to shout out?
One thing that's always worth mentioning is that you can always find help and support directly in the Libby app. So to do that, all you have to do is go to the menu within the navigation bar, and you can find help and support with the button that says help and support. So really easy to find. Once you get there, you can say you have a problem, a question, or an idea. I do want to always mention that when you reach out to technical support, that's going to be Overdrive's technical support. It's not your library. And so don't use that as a way to ask for certain books to be added to the collection, because they're just going to direct you back to the library. It is for questions and problems with the app itself.
Definitely. That is a great thing to remind everyone. You have access to our tech support team 24/7. And yes, they can only help you with Libby related things. They can't tell you about upcoming programming, help you, figure out a fine or an issue with your library card. And no, they can't take book recommendations, but they are there for everything else. If something isn't looking right or working right, or one of my favorite things, like Marissa mentioned, if you have a suggestion, if you are, using the app and you think I'd really benefit from this feature, we'd love to hear it. Well, great. It doesn't look like we have any questions coming through, so we are going to end a little early. But once again, thank you all so much for joining us today. Please complete the survey that will pop up in your screen when I end the webinar in just a second here. And most importantly, we hope you enjoy your weekend and happy
Happy
reading.
reading.